Hi, I'm... Oh. Whew. That was intense. Welcome to my world. I have Tourette's syndrome, a neurological disorder that makes me have these uncontrollable outbursts randomly throughout my daily life. And to describe the specific mental sensation that precedes these tics, as we like to call them, is practically impossible. But what I like to say to the young people I routinely work with as a teaching artist or a substitute teacher is, you know when you have a really bad mosquito bite and it's just itching like crazy, but you know that if you scratch it, it won't go away, it'll only make it worse, but you can't take it, so you do it anyway thinking, maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe I'll actually scratch the itch and it won't come back. That's kind of what it's like. I mean, it doesn't actually physically itch. That's just a way to describe how it feels in my mind. But sometimes it does manifest in a sort of physical way, and I just really need you to understand exactly what I'm saying, even though you're probably not going to be able to, but... So, the social disconnect and obsession is always right there with the tics and anxiety, so that I'm always carrying around this seafood paella of neuroses. And on top of that, I live in New York City. So I'm constantly ticking in large groups of people, whether it's in an elevator or on the subway or in a conversation with someone I just met. Like, hi, nice to meet you. What do you do with your life? I'm sorry, I have Tourette's syndrome. It's a neurological disorder, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm talking about me again. But I realize now that I have a responsibility to educate people. And as much as I would like to bury my nose in a book, I can't escape the reality that an entire subway car is staring at me. And I only have a short window of opportunity to explain myself before they go off into the world. This one time, I was at the back of the C train, looking out the window. And side note, the C train is the oldest train line in the New York City subway system, and it's the only one where there are windows in the front and the back, so you can look out at the 100-year-old tunnels while you're moving through them. So I'm pressed up against the glass, just looking out, just like when I was a little kid, and just as giddily hopping up and down and pointing like, ooh, graffiti, and ooh, rats. And out of nowhere, I just let out this massive, ugly tic. I mean, and I turn around, and everyone is looking at me. Now, the way I handled it is the way I wish I always did. I laughed and made a little joke, and then gave a brief explanation to a crowd of smiling faces and nodding heads. And then they went off into their day, having learned something about Tourette's syndrome. But I wasn't always comfortable enough to do it. I would just pretend it wasn't happening, or ignore this elephant in the room, or sort of explain it away briefly with barely any explanation so that the person I was talking to would just back away and then go get tested for tuberculosis without having learned anything about Tourette's, an already deeply misunderstood disorder. But I have had millions of conversations with strangers about it. Some go better than others. Sometimes people are friendly and open-minded and interested. Sometimes they're rude and ignorant and make me want to bash their faces in. Sometimes they tell me they know what Tourette's is, but they still want me to cover my mouth. Fair enough. Sometimes they say they know what it is, but they don't believe that I actually have it. Sometimes they try to offer me suggestions for treatment, lecturing me, or believing that they can swoop in and solve my problem with remedies I haven't tried. Like, you know what? I have an allergist I really want you to try. You know what? Have you ever tried acupuncture? You know what? You should stay away from gluten. You should stay away from sugar. You shouldn't eat too much dairy. You know what? Have you ever tried transcranial magnetic stimulation? Yeah. No, I have. Please let me go. I understand that people want to help, but it's frustrating when the supposed help actually hurts, and how little they actually understand that. We have a tendency, at least in America we do, to fix problems quickly and to put a positive spin on things. But when there's nothing positive about it, and for someone to just drop meaningless platitudes like, everything happens for a reason, or different strokes for different folks, it feels like they're ignoring me. Or they just don't want to deal with the actual complexity of the disorder. And suddenly, it's like I'm talking to a robot. And they're not actually talking to me. They're just sort of like spouting meaningless drivel. And I'm like, what? Is there someone else here I don't know about? Because this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, does your system have to be rebooted or something? But of course, you can't say that. You have to just listen and pick your battles. I've learned that as tough as it can be to hold my tongue while someone is trying to exercise my demons, no one benefits from hostility. And like it or not, I'm in a unique position here. My wife once told me that a friend of hers told her a story from a friend of hers that she had been on the subway in New York and overheard this man loudly clearing his throat and sniffing and attracting lots of hostility from strangers nearby. And apparently, he explained that it was Tourette's syndrome and then engaged them in a conversation about it. And my wife's friend determined that that actually had been me. That's honestly when I realized that I'm in a special position to utilize these unwanted interactions for good. I mentioned before that I work with young people. I have a colorful career as a teacher in many different capacities. As an acting teacher, as an after-school sports coach, as a substitute teacher, going into lots of scary places in far-flung parts of New York City. But some of the most meaningful experiences of my life have been working with kids with disabilities. As someone who remembers elementary school as a time when I couldn't do anything right, and I was constantly feeling like something was wrong with me because I just couldn't keep up with my classmates, it's especially empowering to encourage these young people to embrace the totally bonkers way that their minds work. And because I'm an actor and I teach acting, I get to have this experience building theater with kids with disabilities. I will never forget the boy on the autism spectrum who created his own character in an original play we were making. He was a two-headed cat named Beverly and Elliot, who lived inside of a trunk in a giant mansion in the middle of a big desert, surrounded by a massive forest on an isolated island. That tells you a lot. He would rush out on stage and then yell at his castmates, "Ha ha ha, you weirdos out there, I'm smart and you're weak." He stole the show. And luckily, I've had the opportunity to work with kids with Tourette's as well. I serve on the board of the New York City chapter of the Tourette Association of America. And it's amazing to meet these kids and to relate to their tics and to see how much more comfortable they are talking about it than I ever would have been at their age. I had the opportunity to be sent down to Washington, D.C. a few years ago to take part in this massive conference for people with Tourette's. I don't have time to explain all the incredible stories from that week, but one thing that really touched me was how comfortable they all were with who they are. I mean, we were down there in this isolated environment together, ticking and just doing all the wild stuff we do without any worry of bullying or harassment. For 1 week, we just got to be normal. I would love to know what the hotel staff thought of that week. And a lot of people with Tourette's have some sort of creative ability that separates them from other people. And it's not always easy to determine what that is or how it's useful, but it's worth it. I mean, you might not be any good at all at algebra, but maybe you're an expert at arranging your shoelaces according to color and size until they fill up your entire floor. And it's hard to figure out how that could be an ability. But again, it's worth it. There was a very successful surgeon who had really violent tics, I mean, throwing things against walls. But when he cut open a patient, he never made a mistake. And then, of course, Tim Howard, the incredibly popular goalkeeper for the US national soccer team, has Tourette's, and when the play is upfield, he'll be ticking the whole time. But when he's tending goal, he's completely focused and composed. Now, I don't know why any of this stuff happens. They actually know very little about what Tourette's is. But I do know that for those of us who think a little bit differently in non-traditional ways, there's something that makes us unique that we have to find. As an educator, I really do try to take the time to let those people find their way, because it's worth it. I mean, do you really want to live in a world without a two-headed cat? I know I don't. Thank you.